Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Kris. This is I'm just going to say it, and the story of Tarafa, Tarafa. Wow, I butchered right away. Tarafa Ib al. Yep, nailed it. If it's incorrect, it's because I nailed it incorrectly. Pre-Islamic poet. I've seen this guy before. I've done a couple of his videos. Um, this was a request, by the way. Before we get started, if you can click that thumbs up for me, trust me, it helps. Tells YouTube that people should watch my videos. Helps the channel grow. I can only do so much. Thanks button here. Donate to the channel to keep it running. All right, this is going to be two parts. We're going to break it down about 19 some minutes.
People, Tarafa ibn al-Abd al-Bakri. Let me introduce to you this personality, okay, from pre-Islam. This guy, he is from the tribe of Bakr ibn Wa'il. Those of you that remember that we'd spoken about Rabi'ah and the whole, and this was a huge tribe, Bakr ibn Wa'il, and the whole, the war that they had, Harb al-Basus, if you remember, Harb al-Basus with Bani Taghlib versus Bani Bakr, but they were all part of Rabi'ah. And Bakr ibn Wa'il were always this kind of like a fighter kind of tribe, and they were known, they were quite surplus, lived right down from the Middle East region into Najd, and they were kind of scattered. And and there's this, and we'll actually go through this incident. There was a time where, I don't know if I've narrated it before, known as the day of the Qar, where they actually take on the Sassanid dynasty. And it's in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, that battle. We'll speak about that another day, and that's where they take on Parvez. He's the Kisra of the time. But Bakr ibn Wa'il are this kind of tribe, and they're known for this kind of this boastful attitude, and they've had several poets from them. This poet, or this personality, Tarafa ibn al-Abd al-Bakri, he is Sahib al-Mu'allaqa. That means his poem, his Mu'allaqa, is one of the 10 attached poems that was attached to the Kaaba as the gold standard of poetry. His poetry has been deemed, if not the highest form of poetry, then at least it comes second. So some people claim that Imra al-Qais, who we've covered, has, his Mu'allaqa is the best, people say. Then he comes, if Imra al-Qais takes gold, then he takes silver. Tarfat ibn al-Abd al-Bakri. And he has a famous Mu'allaqa, which begins لخولة أطلال ببرقة ثهمتي تلوح كباقي الوشم في ظاهر اليد. That is speaking about his love, and he has many loves. He's not monogamous, this personality. Some of them are, like, if you remember Antara, who was the warrior, it was just Abla till death, it was that. But some of them are kind of like all shall we say high in exploration, and amongst them is Tarafat ibn al-Abd, and he's incredibly wise for being so young. His poetry is so full of wisdoms that they became proverbs that some are even used till today. So for example, in Arabic, there is a proverb that istanwaq al-ba'ir. So if somebody says, if you mix, it's a bit like in English, they're saying, it's a bit like saying apples and oranges, where somebody is mixing something somewhat similar yet different, that they're both kind of fruits, but they're different. And somewhat in that regard is where he comments on one of his uncles, who's speaking about a ba'ir, which is a male camel, but he accidentally attributes something to it that is female. And Tarafa said, istanwaq al-ba'ir, that, he istanwaqa is to treat as a female camel, al-ba'ir, the male camel. as in he got it wrong. He's mixing apples with oranges in that sense, and this has become a proverb which is still used in Arabic. And he has many wisdoms like this. Like he said in the poem that أبا منذر أفنيت أبا منذر أفنيت بعضنا أبا منذر فاستبقي أفنيت بعضنا هنانيك فبعض الشر أهون من بعض. He said that, you see, this line of his, not hananik means just go easy, but بعض الشر أهون من بعض, that some evil is easier than others. As in, some evil is less than other evils. This has, or some harm is more tolerable, became proverbial. So like that, he has many. He has in his poem that وَمِنَ الْجُنُونِ حُبٌّ مُسْتَعِرٌ. Allah, and he says, and from insanity is the inflamed love. You see. So Tarafa ibn al-Abd, incredibly wise young man, who in such he passes away as a very young man, just in his mid-late 20s, 26, and some people say maybe 27 years of age. But in that time, he says all of these things, these incredible poems that we still have to today, full of all of these gems. And his mu'allaqa, which I mentioned, لِخَوْلَةَ أَطْلَالٌ بِبُرْقَةِ ثَهْمٍ. Burqa is like this kind of desert which has mixed sand and stones. بِبُرْقَةِ ثَهْمٍ. In this place, she has ruins, debris. تَلُوحُ كَبَاقِ الْوَشْمِ فِي ظَاهِرِ الْيَدِ. The debris of the ruins of her old dilapidated home stand out as the way a tattoo appears in the hand, he's saying. That and he says وقوفا بها صحبي علي مطيهم يقولون لا تهلك أسم وتجلد. That he says that my companions, they kind of, as we stood there, they kind of tell me, look, don't kind of destroy yourself, don't be ruined over her, have some strength. And this is an amazing, honestly, he does get a bit, it's one of the longest, it is the longest mu'allaqa. It is over 100 couplets in it. I think 104 or something. But he has so many, he gets carried away about his camel, describing his camel, which we'll find boring as hell. But then he starts to put all these wisdoms in there that are so, brilliant. He has a line in there that he says, لَظُلْمُ ذَوِي الْقُرْبَى أَشَدُّ مَضَادَةً على النفس من وقع الحسام المهند. Allah. He says, when your own relatives or the people near and dear to you do oppress you, he says it hits harder than a fine steel sword. The finest swords. Muhannad was a sword made out of fine Indian steel back then. They would call it Muhannad, from the word Hind. And it was a highly kind of like valued sword. So he says it hits harder than that. And this guy, what he had, he's actually related to several other poets. There's the two famous Muraqish. They are his uncles. He's from his dad's side. And from his mum's side, he has a famous uncle who's a poet known as Al-Mutalammis. And people say his name was Abdul Masih, or some say it's Jarir ibn Abdul Masih, whatever. But he's known as Al-Mutalammis. And he and Al-Mutalammis, they're very tight. They hang out. Al-Mutalammis from his mother's side is from a different, still from that kind of Rabi'a tribe of Dubay'a, Dubai. But he's... But anyway, he's a poet as well. And you see, poets were they were rated, but they were feared in that day and age as well, because they would say a poem about you and it would go viral. and they would diss you. They released these diss tracks about you and they would go viral. So what happens is Tarafa, he has a relative, his own brother-in-law, yeah, his wife's husband. Oh, sorry, wife's brother. He's the husband, wife's brother. So his brother-in-law, who's also from the same tribe, and that guy's name is Abdu Amr, right? So
I've heard a lot of names, and I'm having trouble following. I don't even know if we're still talking about the same person anymore. I'm confused. Yep. That's all I can say right now. I do not care for the way this guy tells stories. It's confusing to me. I don't know.
this Abdu Amr, they have some kind of, he doesn't kind of get on with him or something, um, and one day, there's some family bickering going on, and maybe the wife's told the brother something, and the brother's like, that good for nothing, the family politics. So he says, the brother-in-law says something to him, and that's the worst thing you want to say to a poet, because it's like nowadays, I guess, the influencers, you say something, and the influencers will be like, hey, I have a meltdown on social media. So Tarafa, he has this meltdown in the form of a poem. And he says this poem about his brother-in-law. And he says in it that La khayra fihi ghayra anna lahu ghinan. Now, this is a style, it's a diss track, okay? It's dissing him. But the style of literary style is one that Arabs would use to really praise people. But they would begin it as though they're going to diss you. But it became a style that they would say, the only thing good about him, or they would say, La khayra fi, there's no goodness that you'll find in him except, and then there would be the volta, the kind of plot twist, the kind of, the punchline that they would say, except he's incredibly generous, or, this is how they would say it. So it's like, it became a thing. And you have in Sahih Bukhari as well the poem that comes down that they say, I think, about the sword that comes from Zubayr radiallahu an. And I think it's is it in Abdul Malik's time or one of the kings, he has it. And the poem that La khayra fihim ghayra anna suyufahum bihinna fululun min qira'il kataib. Allah. Honestly, I love that line. It's in Sahih Bukhari as well, but it's a famous poem.
Okay. I don't know what you just said, but yeah, that was a diss, all right. I have no idea what's happening right now. Can you translate for that for me?
Of the Arabs, that they say, there's no goodness in them except that their swords have been dented excessively by the clash of armies.
That's an insult?
You see, it's a way of saying that they're so like they've been through so many wars that their swords carry so many dents. And this is obviously reflecting their courage and victories and triumphs. And
how is that an insult? I don't know what's happening.
Legacy, but it begins by saying La khayra fihim. There's no goodness in them. Illa ghayra anna siyufahum, except their swords. Bihinna fululun. Fulul is the dentness. Bihinna fululun min qira'il kataib. So this guy says, Tarafa ibn Tarafa, he says about his brother-in-law. He says, La khayra fihi ghayra anna lahu ghinan. He says, there's no goodness in him except that he has richness. So you think, Okay, so this is building up. It's getting climactic. غير أن له غنى وأن له كشحا إذا قام أهضم. He says, and except that he has a fat, plump waist, that when he gets up, it's all feminine and kind of like, it's. So you think he's going to praise him, and then he just really disses him.
Because he has a muffin top? Man, insults were a lot different back then than they are today. I don't understand the whole poetry thing. Maybe that's the thing. Poetry does nothing for me. I understand it was big. Before battles, they would come out and slam each other. Like, it does nothing. I just don't get it.
Saying, the best thing about him is he's really curvaceous, and voluptuous. This is what he's saying about him. So obviously this poem has gone viral. Yeah. Now, this brother-in-law, Abdu Amr, he happens to be one of the kind of the guys who hangs out with the king in Hira, which was in modern day Iraq, the old cultural capital of the Arabs, which is the Lakhmid dynasty, their capital. Okay, and the Ghassanid capital was Busra, but these guys, it's Al-Hira. So the king there at the time was Amr ibn Hind. Some people said it was Nu'man ibn Munzir, who we've spoken about, but I think most likely it was probably Amr ibn Hind. So, and this guy was like a vicious king as well, and he's really known, and he ruled like an excessively long amount of time, like some 40 plus years.
Oh, I was going to say he ruled like 600 years, but yeah, 40 is probably more accurate. But let's just say he ruled for 600 years. That guy by himself.
He's got it on lock. Right, the Arabs fear him. And so anyway, what happens is Abdu Amr, the brother-in-law, he happens to be have a relationship with the king, as in because the kings in the past, what they used to do is they used to enjoy good company. So they would have like nowadays people watch movies and do stuff, that they would have their evening gatherings. So they would look out for, so they would ask that if anybody, imagine you knew somebody that's great company. That was like prized after. It was like a great prize. So they would hunt out great company, like people who knew poetry, people who were funny, people who you could just sit and they would drink with them. And they called them, the Arabic word is nadim, like a drinking partner. Okay. So so these people, they were from the kind of nadman of the king. So the brother-in-law. So he's chilling with him one day and he's drinking, and then they go out on this hunting thing. They go, yeah, let's go hunting. So whilst they're hunting, they hunt this kind of wild, this zebra. So this kind of, they find this thing, and the king hunts it.
It wasn't a zebra. It was a horse with stripes. It just made me laugh. All right.
So when he hunts it, he tells this guy, the brother-in-law's Abdu Amr, he says to him, there's a lot of Amrs here, by the way, in this story, all Amrun, so many Amrs. He tells him, the brother-in-law, that, hey, I've caught it. So they catch this animal. I think it was some kind of like a zebra or some wild animal they've caught. And he chucks it in this ditch. And now he's the king, he doesn't want to kind of cut it up and get all blood over him. So he tells this guy, this brother-in-law of Tarafa, he tells him that, hey, could you jump in there and cut it up for us, will you? Bring us the meat. So this guy jumps in there and he's trying, and he can't seem to cut it. It's not easy cutting an animal. And so he's trying, and he's like, the triceps ain't really working. So he's like, when he can't seem to do it. So the king looks at him and he starts laughing. Like he says, yaar, he kahe ko mardo yaar. Like what kind of a man are you? And the king says, that, it's true what Tarafa says about you, that لا خير فيه غير أن له غنى وأن له كشحا إذا قام أهضم. That he says, what Tarafa said about you is so true. That, what the only thing you're good for is just being curvaceous. So obviously this guy now, Abdul Amr, he's like insulted. So human emotions, they get the better of us. So he says, aha. He says, well, you think that's bad? You should hear what he says about you. Now, if ever in history a sentence has caught somebody's attention, believe me, for the love of God, it has been that one. When somebody says, do you know what such and such, you should hear what such and such says about you. If our attentions are suddenly acha. So what does he say about it? So he says, no, what does he say? So he reads this poem to him where basically Tarafa says about the king that we have a king who's if only in place of him we had a sheep. Basically, look, there's a little backstory to this. That
instead of a king, we had a sheep.
The kings, and I've mentioned this before when I spoke of the later king, Nu'man ibn Munzir, they used to have these weird distribution of days. So they would say that they divide their days in two. Like one day, Yawm Bu's, Yawm Na'm. So they would have one day which is like for the people. Like let's say they see people, they deal with what they need and stuff. And they would have another day where they, for example, one of them, whoever he meets, he's going to kill him. Or some kings had that, but this guy, he would have a day where he goes hunting.
Kings would have a thing where whoever they meet, they're going to kill them? I wouldn't think the king would be king for very long. If you just randomly start killing people.
That day, you could be dying, he's not going to help you. He would only go hunting. And if he met people on that day and you came in his way, he would just shoot you with an arrow. So Tarafa had said a poem about him. He'd said that, this guy, this king, if we had a sheep in place of him, it would be more useful. At least it could kind of give us milk, like whenever we need it. He said he has a day where he goes hunting birds, like he sends off his falcon and he kind of hunts these birds. He says, well, at least the birds can fly away. What about us? We can't even fly away. So he had this poem. So this guy this brother-in-law tells the king that he said this poem about you. Now, the king...
I'm going to go back because that was a nice pause. We're going to go ahead and stop it there. I'm not quite... It's making a little more sense now. He's talking about the king and all that, but I have no idea what happened the first few minutes. I guess it mentally wasn't making sense. I wasn't following it. But we'll be back with part 2. I really didn't have anything to add because I didn't, I don't know. Maybe there's another story by somebody else. I don't care for the way this guy tells a story. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm used to Dr. Omar. I didn't forget your name. I promise I didn't. I did forget his name, didn't I? I keep wanting to say Dr. Yaddy, but I don't think that's right. I can see your face, man. I apologize. Even Roy Casagrande's decent, although he does get some stuff wrong. Anyways, maybe it's because only done one other thing with this guy, so I'm not used to the way he does stories. Anyways, we'll be back with part 2. But until then, have a good day, have a good night.